one way to sense into the story is to think that an epoch, epoch is really a combination or a set of power structures or potencies that offer permissions for a certain story to unfold. In metaphoric terms, you could say that we are looking at a fuel tank that was proffered for humanity sometime in the 3,000 to 3,500 years long wave arc. And if you play with this crude metaphor for a minute, you'd think that if you have a fuel tank, every time, at every point where we are running to the point of exhausting the fuel in the tank, one of three things are likely to happen. We either need a refuel of the tank, or we need somehow a capacity to get connected to a whole new tank, or thirdly, we need to possibly discover a whole new car emerging to carry us forward. So if you took this frame of mind, you'd say, when you travel back through to the time of the 1,000 years of the emergence of world religions, that appeared when humanity experienced a rapid decline with festering conditions. And you could imagine those world religions ultimately culminating with the appearance of Jesus and what he represented beyond the person himself, potentially as a representation of a refueling time, where the tank that was connected to the human system was receiving a new fuel to be able to embark on the journey and go through the kind of rescue and survival process that was needed at the time. And then you proceed and you go again into dark times and dark ages, because that's what humanity is, the story of humanity. Every time we get a booster shot, no pun intended, and we see a gradual decline. And when there is a gradual decline, there is a gradual exhaustion of the fuel that unlocked or unleashed or released that new stage. And now you come into the phase such as the Renaissance on the arc to the Enlightenment, and what happens in that age and what's coming online through the proliferation of knowledge earlier on, the invention of the printing press and so on, and what that released into the early stages of the scientific revolution before our friend Descartes becomes the agency of the separation of the inner and the outer worlds, and we all embrace suspicion as the operating model to validate truth, rather than one that is ready to integrate the inner worlds. But right before that, you could describe that as a phase in humanity's story where we are getting connected to a whole new fuel tank. And that fuel activates permissions and perceptions and capabilities and way of doing and being, and so on. So everything you are describing earlier in this conversation, which you and I have not rehearsed and I had no idea you were going to describe, to me is a validation point that we are now in one of those three transitions, or all at the same time, right? We potentially are now being refueled, or we are potentially now connecting to a whole new fuel tank, and or could it be that we are actually getting to experience something else altogether, which is a deeper, more profound, more transformative change than even these changes, where a new car is coming online, and in that sense, the new car is a metaphor or a way of describing a new model of life, a new model of human life, a new model of human system that you were already describing in so many ways. That's the story that I'd be telling at a high level. If we went to a higher resolution level, we would break it down to the 7 different natures and potencies, which we can do at another time. But this idea that could it be that we are now being refueled, connecting to a whole new fuel tank, and actually we're doing so inside a new model, a new car, is a compelling story for me to reflect on and imagine. And if that is the case, indeed, the question we asked right at the beginning, which is, so what is the operating system of this change, becomes so important. And then all the adjacent questions, such as, where do we see this operating system appearing? And you're describing that is happening around transformative and transformational gatherings in cafes all around the country, all around the world. And we will ask, so how is this operating system revealing itself in the different domains, in the healing and well-being domain, in economic models, in education models, in entrepreneurial models? Where and when can we see that? What part can we play? How can we collaborate? All those questions, they become so very important because they take the story from an imaginary theological framing into an actualized, embodied, experiential, I get to play, I get to unlock my talent and my gift here and now with others, and we get to participate in this nursery of life, which I gather is what you actually probably mean when you talk about the midwifery process, becoming a midwife for the evolutionary process.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love how much you're introducing the word play, because it really is, I convene these things called possibilities playgrounds, where we invite people to come and play in possibility. And there's so much of this that's, hey, we can have a model making playground where we sit around and intellectualize what might happen. And we can actually drop into our bodies or drop into the moment and play and see, what is it like to live life outside of all that story and idea of who I think I am, and the concepts of the way things should work and might work, and actually play right here, right now, in this moment, and to just feel the childlike sense of joy and wonder and awe and inspiration that comes through, rekindling that flame in us. And to me, that space, the space that we're in now, that quality of presence, that's what invites the hospicing out of the old and the midwifing in the new, is ultimately we can get together and construct what the future is going to look like all we want. And the future ultimately is a concept that we're thinking about right now. And so we are manifestation. We are in this moment, from this quality of presence, bringing a new world into being.
What are some of the discoveries you're making when you are convening these playgrounds, and what are some of the highlights? Because when you're describing that, what I hear is that you are creating laboratories to discover, to unlock, to download, to play with a new operating system. So I'm very curious, what are some of the discoveries you're making?
Well, it's when we contextualize it and frame everyone up, and everyone can feel safe to really surrender. I mean, in these playgrounds I convene, we don't have an agenda. We're coming into a space that's purely emergent, and we're coming in and going, what's alive in each of us? What's alive in the space between us? And we open up and start to surrender to that evolutionary pulse and see how it wants to have its way through us. And so the magic of these gatherings is in getting together and surrendering our need to control how things are going to go, and surrendering our need to know what's going to happen. If we can actually buy into that and come in and dance in possibility and play in the moment, like magical, crazy things can start happening. It's just It's beyond understanding, like the experience of it. I mean, we're having it right now, right? I mean, we had no idea what we're going to talk about in this thing. We're just having a blast. And and to me, like that's part of this operating system that wants to come online with humanity right now. Is like, do we remember what it's like in your body? Can you feel like and let it in and remember what it's like to have fun and to really connect with people and to show up with all of who we are in the moment and to see and be seen and to feel and be felt by each other from this place. Like that in and of itself, that state of being, that quality of presence, that experience, that births new futures.
Yeah. So, well, for example, serendipity and synchronicity are not what they thought to be. They are more an expression of an entangled universe making itself known as you have people stepping into a different presence, a different consciousness, a different sensitivity and attunement, and a different release in themselves. So how about if I just pile on this and add another layer to the story? Because it's one thing to tell the story of an epochal shift, an epoch culmination. How about if we describe this at the meta level as an epochal arc for humanity, which I try to sense into, and then as the way you are describing in those experimental playgrounds. How about if we integrate to the story and human model dimension, and we skate to the daring point to say something like the following, which is that what you are beginning to describe and what we are just talking about here, these are some early evidences, very early evidences of the emergence of what truly is and can be a new human model. So think of the human model in my crude metaphor, the car that we were driving over the last several thousand years, that we were driving the car that we called Homo sapiens sapient, or the sapiens sapiens species, which was defined by the idea that we developed the capacity to be aware of our awareness and conscious of our consciousness. Hence, you could talk about a second person and a third person perspective, because you could actually watch the field of awareness and consciousness and discover that field as a theater of emergence. And that, by the way, that's where we separated ourselves from all other planetary beings that are aware beings, but do not necessarily have the facility of that extra layer of awareness. So how about if we said that all that was great and enabled us the transition that we came through over the last, one way you could tell it 3,000 years, another way you tell it as a 10,000-year story. We can go to longer time horizons on a different tangent another time. But how about if we said that what is now occurring is that we have the new Homo Universalis coming online. And that what that means is literally what you were describing, which is that we get to play at all those different perspectives, and we get to transcend all of them, not as a bypass act, but by way of integrating and embodying the whole. And that Homo Universalis in that is not an intellectual or a mental modeling exercise, but rather a description of a new system that's coming online that is able to access the whole, and perhaps therefore we need to bring two additional descriptors to describe Homo Universalis. One would be Homo Connectus, and the other would be Homo Evolutus. So Homo Connectus would be the human model that's connected to the entirety of life, inside out, outside in, able to be present in a localized way or a universal way anywhere, anytime, where that facility is there, or at least being gradually activated. Perhaps we are describing a 1,000-year development story. Everything you're describing is the emergence of it is occurring now, the full realization of which may be a 1,000-year story, including the evolution of the physical model to adapt to the shape-shifting nature of the consciousness and energetic model that's being activated. And Homo evolutus in that, representing the idea, the different way of talking about what you talk to in the idea of being a midwifery for the evolutionary process, because what we are literally describing there is a condition where the human system, the person that you are, the person that I am, the person that we are, collectively, together, we become an active conduit, an active agency on behalf of the evolutionary process, where it gets to know of itself through us, because it can only find itself in this planetary arena through the experience of human beings who are there to be on the manifesting end, skating to the edge of what they thought they knew, to peek beyond and discover the beyond, and do so safely, without blowing up the system, without blowing up themselves on the inside, because people throughout the ages, often when they skated to the edge of consciousness, they blew themselves up, or they became destructive and disruptive to their environment. So I'd encourage that these are some elements of the new story that we are exploring and sensing into.
Yeah, absolutely. I what first comes up for me, just to the end again, I love the warning and the piece you gave too around just what it's like to skate on the frontier. I mean, if you look at concrete frontiers, like look at what it was like for human beings to, again, I'm going to use the West, but pioneer the West, right? Like you're literally going into unknown territory. And so in this dance of consciousness, the same thing's happening. And just having other people in your constellation who are playing on the frontier, who you can sort of shine the light together and go, is that where we want to go? And have you been there? And what's that over there like? And share learnings is a good resource kind of network to create for people playing on the frontier, for sure.
The beauty in the awareness that you articulate there is two additional dimensions to this. One is the devotional servant leader awareness. The people that pioneered the West knew that they were doing this on behalf of generations to come. It's that same consciousness when in the 4th or 5th or 6th century you started as a mason building a cathedral, and you knew that not even your son will walk into the completion of the cathedral, but your grandson or the 4th generation. So that idea that we are participating in something that will ultimately see its full fruition after us. And even though, by the way, it's now moving faster than ever before, and the awareness that we are describing processes that are non-linear. So by definition, there are times where it seems like nothing much is going on. And it's not true. A lot is going on. It's just occurring at an invisible level. There is some foundation that's being fashioned. There is some transmutation that's coming together. But it appears as though nothing is going on for a long time. And then there is a rapid transition that's totally non-linear. And when you trace the evolutionary process, there is significant evidence that it doesn't follow the gradualist school of thought. It follows rather the quantum equilibria school of thought, where there are those profound leaps. And then again, could it be that we are now actually living through a period where we have both? There is a lot that's apparently changing, but there is even 10x or 100x that's not yet fully revealing, that's changing under the surface and will reveal itself over time. And hence the importance of not being attached to outcome, not comparing or contrasting or measuring yourself in traditional KPIs, so to speak, along this process, because you're actually participating in. We are having this conversation right now, and for all intents and purposes, there may be half a dozen conversations like this somewhere else on the planet through a slightly different frame of reference occurring right now. And as the 4-minute mile threshold was broken in one place and accelerated its release in other places all at the same time, this idea of portals of perception is really that idea that when few humans come through a portal of perception and come into the realization and actualization of a possibility they didn't see before, they dramatically accelerate the permission for other people to go through similar breakthroughs in themselves, and the chain reaction is so rapidly, it can unfold so rapidly that we shouldn't underestimate how quickly that process can take place. And so the readiness to be inside the experiences of the laboratories you're describing, those playgrounds, and not be all too important or heavy about it at all, actually be present in the moment fully, almost to the exclusion of all else, whilst you are ready to embrace at the same time that unbeknown to you, you are perhaps playing with others, playing a similar adjacent play somewhere else on the planet.
Mm-hmm.